you guys learn about this topic? Like, how did Zulu Club come across your radar? When did you realize it would be an interesting story that needed to be told?
Well, in 2019, like December, I was in New Orleans making a film with Justin Timberlake called Palmer that I directed, and I got to start hanging out at the Zulu Club. My friend Matt, another Matt, told me about it, and I was just a magical place. And then COVID hits, the world shuts down. Cover of New York Times Magazine, why are so many African American men dying of COVID? And on the cover is one of the members of the Zulu Club. And then you read the magazine article, and the club is losing members at an alarming rate. I sent it to Matthew. We worked together on Before the Flood, the Leonardo DiCaprio documentary. And we decided, I said, Matt, let's go. In the middle of COVID, height of COVID, let's drive down from Brooklyn. We both live in Brooklyn. Got cameras, got another shooter, and we got permission from my friend to film because people were like wanting to talk. We drove down to New Orleans, June 2020, with our masks and our before anything, and we shot for 2.5 days, 16 interviews, and that was the genesis of this movie, which was now. COVID is a tiny, it has very little to do with our movie, but it was just the catalyst.
Yeah, I mean, those 16 interviews that we shot during that 2.5 days that Fisher mentioned, it's the bedrock of the film. It was such a pivotal time in our culture. It's like Fisher said, it was the first summer of the pandemic, a few months after George Floyd was murdered, and there's just such an amazing sense of individuals in New Orleans that just wanted to tell their story, and even though we were only there for a short period of time, the quality of the stories that we heard, I mean, there wasn't an interview that Fisher and I conducted that by the end of the interview we're both in tears, and it wasn't tears of pity, it was tears of anger and frustration of some of the inequities and inequalities that we discovered during the course of those days.
I'm glad you guys specifically mentioned those 16 interviews in like 2.5 days because that's in the press notes, and I'm like, really? Like, that's not a typo? Like,
we were out of control because we knew. We're like, how often do we get this? And also, we wanted to show the club. Now, the club has never allowed any filmmakers to really make movies about them. And we're from Brooklyn. We're not from New Orleans. And for whatever reason, that 2.5 days, those 16 interviews, really, we gained their trust. And then, Matt went down not so soon afterwards, to just kind of lock in their trust. And we are grateful to the club for allowing us, and it was a really beautiful moment, and the journey continued.
And part of the organic nature of documentary filmmaking, especially when you're telling a verite story, is you open yourself up to possibilities that you didn't envision originally. So like Fisher said, we prepped for about a month before we headed down to New Orleans, and we had 24 hours in the car to talk and to make phone calls with the folks in New Orleans that we were going to be connecting with. And actually, Terrence Rice, who is the main character of the film, he was actually originally just going to be our Zulu fixer. And his interview on the tractor was the last interview that we filmed during the 2.5 days. And it, after Fisher had to push me a lot to get it back in the film, but it really was the soul of the film, and wasn't on the schedule to be interviewed. He was just following around, listening to every single interview, and it just culminated in that moment on the tractor that's in the film that it's so incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I don't think you ever see a character like Terrence starring in a documentary. I think the beauty of this and what Matt was able to capture the rest of the time with Terrence is a story that of a person that you don't see represented very often in films, and he was the catalyst, and he's we're so excited to see him tonight, and he's going to be here of course he brought 50 New Orleanians with him. It's going to be quite a night.
And apologies, because this is going to be like a heavy question that can't be answered in a 90-minute documentary or a 10-minute interview, for that matter. Looking into this story and the COVID aspect of it, did you get any insight into why healthcare outcomes for Black Americans are just so unacceptably dismal?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it hits a lot closer to home than I would love to deal with, at least at this point. I have two parents who are both diabetic, hypertension, both with dialysis patients, both have congestive heart failure, congenitive heart failure. It's a lot of it is environment, a lot of it is lifestyle, but also a lot of it it's systemic. It's a system that was created where a lot of individuals, oftentimes individuals who are black and brown or minority or poor, are just in situations where they don't have access to quality health care, quality foods, education around essentially just taking care of yourself, So some of it is that. What we discovered is that, there's a great moment actually with Terrence in the film where he's driving in his truck and he's explaining where he lives. And he lives in this suburb of New Orleans called Destrehan. And he chose to live in that neighborhood because it would give him the middle-class suburban lifestyle that he wanted for his family. But a result of that is that the fact that this suburban, beautiful neighborhood has a beautiful home is just a couple miles down the road from 3 petrochemical plants.
In a place called Destrehan is part of the Cancer Alley in Louisiana.
Right. So in order for him to feel like he can have a middle-class American lifestyle, the trade-off is he could be potentially cutting his life, the life of his family, life of his kids short because he wants to have this 2-car garage, multi-level home, but that's all that he's able to have, So
those petrochemical plants, the taxes that pay for the schools and the buses, and so we address it, but in different ways than normally are addressed, and it's a part of our film certainly. But the film, it gets into so many, parading, Mardi Gras, blackface. It gets into all these kind of wild stories and issues. And the club is the most powerful men's club, I would say, in New Orleans. And you get an intimate portrait of what it's like for people in this club.
I guess there's really no elegant way to transition off of systemic racism with another question, but with that in mind, Fisher, I wanted to ask you about Succession, if that was all right. Has it sunk in with you now that that you really backed the wrong horse with Kendall Roy there?
Yeah, that was a bummer. So, if there's a sequel, I'm probably out. But it was, we actually had the night before I got here, we had a cast and crew reunion. And it was so great to see everyone. And, it was, I think it was like a magical moment where you rarely get to work with every actor being almost better than you think, and every director just being brilliant, and Jesse and the writing staff just writing the greatest, scripts, and definitely miss it. But it was because of COVID and hiatus that Succession shut down that we got to make this movie. So we're kind of grateful to do that. But no, I miss Succession all the time.
I mean, same. I imagine it's a little bit less personal for me. And then I also wanted to ask you how you came to be involved in the Beckham documentary.
Well, that was another crazy story. So we were in the middle of this, and I got a call from Leonardo DiCaprio's office asking if David Beckham could call me about doing a possible movie, because I've made a few movies with Leo. That's how I know Matt. I guess David asked Leo he couldn't find a director, and Leo recommended me. So Leo knows I love football. Actually, my team is playing right now. Liverpool is playing Man City, the biggest game of the season, and I'm missing it to be talking to you. But no, I'm kidding. But they called me. I wasn't into him, and then again, Succession. I went to the set, and it's all written by Brits, and we talked football all day. And they were. I told Jesse and Tony Roach, guys, David Beckham called me to do his documentary. But now, what do you think of him? And they're like, oh my God, he's one of the greatest English players. And we watched videos. I watched videos, and I met Beckham finally, and he won me over. And it was a great experience.
I'll tell you what, I think we're probably done. That's probably all we have time for. I really appreciate you guys stopping by.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks
for having us.